little bit.
There we go.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the meat of the matter, boys. Today, we're not doing a podcast. We're just doing a topic. We're going to talk about some dementia. We got Mark, Peter, myself, Tony. We've been doing an animal-based, low-carb, carnivore, keto diets for a long time. Peter's a type 1 diabetic. Mark's been a bodybuilder in a bodybuilding competition, understands a lot about metabolism. I have been doing this animal-based carnivore diet for about almost 4 years and a couple months. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've learned with ourselves, our stories, we can relate to a lot of people's journeys, but yet the mainstream still wants to hammer home ridiculousness. And today we're going to talk about dementia. We're going to talk about a little bit what ties into mental health and how the mainstream headline trend-setting dogma really plays a role in the of what we think and how we believe it's wrong. Now, we're not doctors, we're not scientists, but we're going to present a case today, specifically with a study that we've all seen, and just explain how ridiculous it is. So, first of all, boys, let's get into this, because we're all of us, this subject, this topic hits home, and we all sort of cringe and get angry. And let's first get into that. Mark, we'll start with you. How do you feel about when you hear stuff like red meat raises your chance of dementia or increases your risk of some kind of brain related disease? Just kind of give us a little bit of a rant there, buddy.
Okay, I want to give you guys a quick stats. So here's a stat for you, right? I picked this up today. Experts predict dementia around the world is going to triple in the next 30 years. Okay, so take that in for a second. It's going to triple in the next 30 years. Now, when we look at this study, these doctors are blaming this down to poor lifestyle, okay, poor diet. They're blaming on the majority of cholesterol, and they're also blaming this on a lack of exercise. So according to this report, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about this unless we exercise more, our lifestyle, we lead a better healthy lifestyle, and we change our diet. Okay, it doesn't say anything about sugar whatsoever. The next point I want to make is, okay, I want you guys to look at 100 years ago. 100 years ago, this didn't exist. I think the first mention of dementia was back in the 18th century or 19th century. So when we look at what's been changing in the last years, in the last 100 years, what's been added to the supermarkets, what's been added to our food, what's been added to our food list. When we look at red meat, we have been eating red meat for centuries, a lot longer than the last 200 years. So I find it absolutely incredible how these people can demonize red meat, push this narrative when it comes to sugar. Plus, I want you guys to understand this also. This is very, very important. When we look at Alzheimer's, dementia, or mental health, for example, these are all part of type 3 diabetes. Okay, these are facts. And we also need to understand what the brain is made up of. Now, the brain is made up of fat. It's not made up of sugar. Now, this is where people don't understand this. When we hear people talk about, okay, your brain needs glucose. Yes, your brain does need glucose. Yes, your brain does need carbohydrates. But your body produces all the glucose and all the carbohydrate your body needs, okay? You do not need to get this in a diet, period. You can also get glucose from gluconeogenesis. So the question is this: what is causing the problems? Why are people getting sick? Why are people struggling with their mental health? Why is Alzheimer's on the rise in the last 100 years? And I can assure you guys, it's not down to your cholesterol being too high, and it's definitely not down to an intake of red meat, period.
That's well said, Mark. Now, Peter, You being
Yeah, I think
you being a type 1 diabetic, having to control your exogenous glucose and your insulin, when you hear stuff like this from somebody who's feeling better adopting into a meat diet, and I mean, Peter found the study. We'll look at this actually in a minute. But Peter, what are your thoughts when they say this? You've been doing this for a few years. How do you feel when you hear this stuff? The red meat.
Yeah, I'm amazed because yeah, first of all, when you hear a sentence like meat raises the risk of this and this, red meat raises the risk. I've looked several times in researches behind it. You read the news, you read the headlines in the newspapers, and I realized that it's just some simple journalist behind it, probably an intern or so, that just has to write some article to fill the newspapers most of the times, because many times it's not really big news, because according to the mainstream media, it's already proven that red meat causes this and this and this. So these articles, they don't tell you anything new. And yet they present new studies in the newspapers. You look them up and you will always find population research. And one thing I have almost become allergic to are these population researches. And especially in this case, when you look up the research, it's mostly behind paywall, this research behind the latest headlines about dementia. But it does mention some things in the abstracts, and there is a graph in it. So you imagine that they present the best results that they have gotten from their research. And all that they can tell you is that there is a increased incidence of dementia. It's a large population, and it's for many years, but yeah, only with some food frequency questionnaires. So it's already a bit sketchy, the data. But all that it can tell you is that the incidence of dementia increased or is higher by 13%. And that's just correlation on a population level. So for the individual, it doesn't mean anything. And for us three individuals here and our viewers, most of our viewers, it also doesn't mean anything, because that entire population didn't include one person probably on a ketogenic or carnivore diet. So yeah, that on itself is already reason enough to distrust this research. And then when you look into it, the best results that they got out of it, they put a lot of effort in it they try to prove that red meat is poisonous. And you see a graph in which they compare processed red meat intake with, for example, chicken. Well, you can imagine if you eat a lot of chicken, the average person that eats chicken, well, there might be some people that go to this chicken place, how is it called? Kentucky Fried Chicken, for example. But most of them probably will combine it with some broccoli and some exercise and those things. So you see in the research that the incidence of dementia in that case decreased to, I don't know what, it doesn't matter, but like maybe 0.95. Yeah. Then you go to what is it, legumes and fish, and it's lower. Yeah, so you get 20-30% less incidence. Very good. So red meat causes 20-30% more risk of dementia than compared to fish and legumes. Well, what don't you eat with fish and legumes? Well, for sure you don't drink a big glass of Coca-Cola, because that taste-wise it already makes no sense. But yeah, this is healthy user bias 101. Yeah. And you can try to correct for that. But if already the differences in incidence are so small, then, well, you can try to correct for it. But I think that's commonly taken as a minimum for being able to do a proper correction, is that the incidence should be at least like 200% higher before you can make even corrections.
Peter, one thing before I give my 2 cents on this, I want you to, can you explain what healthy user bias is for the people that don't know what that means?
Yeah, so it's very simple, and I think most people can intuitively already think this up. That is, if you tell somebody, if you look at people that are not eating red meat, and you look in the mainstream media, in everything that you hear in the newspapers, everybody tells you that red meat is unhealthy. So people that are conscious of leading a healthy lifestyle will, of course, exercise. They will not drink diet soda. They won't drink any soda or add ketchup to their food. And they will also not eat red meat. So if you look in the populations, those people will automatically be more healthy. And of course, you also have the inverse, is the unhealthy user bias. So the red meat eaters will be the guys that are smoking, take risks in life, will be doing bungee jumping, die earlier, cross the street, maybe even without looking around. Who knows? Yeah, that.
So now, what my take on it is, when I talk to clients, people I love, and try and explain this stuff, generally, what I encourage them to do is they have to take control and learn how to think. They have to see past this utter nonsense. They have to learn about how science actually works, not real science, the pushed science that we're getting inundated with, headlines, epidemiology, causation. Correlation is not causation. Just understanding that and learning where these studies come from. And what ends up happening is I explain to people that you have to see where it's coming from and the whole picture, because once you realize science is largely, especially in the nutrition space, is bought and paid for. I tell people that Harvard is pushing you to an agenda, and they don't believe you, because Harvard it's the best university in the world, right? Like, they would never steer us wrong. They know more than us. And it's so far from the truth. And just to give an example of this, there's a guy, his dog, like, I mean, we're not here to bash anybody. We're not here to dog anybody, but this is a problem I see over and over again, is you have very, very high, politically motivated doctors and people in the plant-based and the universities. You know, you've got your Walter Willett, which we'll get into in a second, who's the most cited doctor, scientist on planet Earth. But you can see his agenda once you see it. Well, there's another one. His name's Neil Barnard. And, you know, I give kudos to anybody that wants to take the power and reclaim their health. Whatever way necessary, if you're on the path, you're trying to figure it out, whatever you decide to do, taking responsibility for your own health is the way to go. But this guy, I remember seeing him in an interview, and it was after one of the Harvard red meat pushes. It's causing, I think at that time, it was high risk of heart disease. Well, he was asked in an interview, and I'm paraphrasing here, why does red meat cause heart disease and type 2 diabetes? And he says, well, the short answer is red meat makes the sugar not work as good. That was his explanation. So, you know, when we're coming from all the angles here, from what Mark was saying and Peter was saying, and just looking at these mainstream pushes, you have to take responsibility for yourself. And you know what? If this stuff bothers you, good. Learn about it, because we're not talking out of our asses here. This is all stuff that we had to deal with and come to know from ourselves and our own research. So now I think it's a good time to move into the study, and we can kind of give our 2 cents of the study. Peter, can you bring up the study? This was the new study that increases dementia risk 13%, where we're going to just sort of get into it, and we'll get Mark's take on it first, if we can get it up here on the screen.
No, I can't really see it. It's very, very small. Just read it out to me, because I can't really see it on my phone.
I'll read it. A prospective study of long-term red meat intake, risk of dementia, and cognitive function in U.S. adults. And then it's basically saying, you know, they put this out there, and their conclusion was 13% risk, a higher risk if you're eating red meat. So you don't even have to read the study, Mark, because I know you. Just, what do you think about that?
I think it's completely rubbish. I've mentioned this on many, many occasions. When they came out with these studies, like what you guys were mentioning at the very, very beginning, they forgot to mention what else they were having with these foods. And that's where the problem was. So when they were eating this red meat, were they eating like buns with it? Were they eating like excessive carbohydrates? Were they drinking alcohol? Like, what other foods were they coming up with? And that was the issue. And when we look at what's going on in the world right now, okay, I would say about 95% of us follow a zero fat diet. Like we don't eat enough fat in the world at the moment. Yet when you look around, insulin resistance is on a high. Okay, inflammation is on a high. Nutrition deficiency is on a high. Okay, cholesterol deficiency is on a high. This is all coming down to a low fat diet. This is where people are struggling. It has nothing to do with red meat whatsoever. These studies were absolutely false. They just didn't come up with the research when, as I said, when they were eating these red meats, they didn't come out with what other people were eating them with, and that was the problem.
That's it. Peter, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with this, and they seem to be using the same data sets that are available every time again, and they do some new data analysis on it. Well, it's still the same data. It's still here they mention it's I think I saw 38 years of follow-up, and every 2 years they do a food frequency questionnaire. And they work with portion sizes and large categories of food. So they have to do a lot of assumptions even to analyze that data. And then we are not even talking about accuracy in terms of food, let's say diet dementia. People forget about what they've been eating after even 1 week or so. I don't recall, for example, half a year ago whether I was eating one pound of meat a day or 1.5 pounds of meat, because it has varied in the previous years of my carnivore diet. So those people in the studies will also not know it. But the biggest issue with this thing here is, well, both of you, I guess, for example, if they do a study like this for sugar, what would be the hazard ratio? Because here it's 1.13 if they are lucky. Because there is the confidence interval, it could also be just 1.08. So that's truly negligible. But tell me how much it is for sugar. Take a guess.
Yeah, probably 7.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that bad, at least not in the studies. I could imagine that you make a study like that and come up with the number 7, but I found some studies, and there are some videos online on Instagram and YouTube that talk about these, in which the correlation or the hazard ratio is like 2 or 3.
Okay, well, yeah, because for anybody out there that just doesn't realize that the hazard ratio, basically, 1 is the sort of the starting point. If it's 1 or less, it's basically noise and just coincidental stuff.
Yeah.
So, can we bring that study back up, Peter? I just want to show a couple.
Sorry,
things.
yeah.
So I'm going to read this back. Like, so when I look at this, now I just did a video, actually, a friend, like one of my clients sent me this hit piece on mainstream news, basically, kind of like doing their media spin on this study. And the whole thing was how red meat is causing cognitive impairment, leading to dementia, 13%, blah, 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 all this stuff. Basically, they showed this little headline as to cite the study. And I want to explain to a few people where we're not scientists. But when you understand what to look for, especially after years of seeing this, I just want to say, so when they do a study, the lead author is that Yuhan Lee. You see how there's all those names. Well, Yuhan Lee is the lead author. The end researcher, Dong Di Wang. Those are the 2 main ones that are conducting the research. The other ones are just the part of if they say et al., that's their group. But now I want to pay attention to Walter C. Willett. Do you notice the names? Why is his name in there? He is the most cited researcher on planet Earth, cited millions of times over and over again. Quite often, he just endorses these studies to have his name on it so that it gets pushed into the literature. So it's kind of a play. And if you understand what he is he's the head of the T.H. School of Health at Harvard, and he's got so much political presence. And right here in the abstract, previous studies yielded inconsistent results regarding the association between red meat intake and cognitive health. So they're basically saying that we've never been able to prove this. But don't worry, We aim to prospectively examine the associations between processed, unprocessed red meat intakes and various cognitive outcomes.
Yeah.
So right away, they've admitted that they've never been able to prove it. They've admitted that they're not talking about red meat, processed meat. It's all so vague. And if you don't understand what you're looking at, you're just going to see this because somebody flashed it on the screen, and you're going to go, holy shit, I got to stop eating red meat because it's going to cause dementia, which is undeniably false.
Yeah.
And you cannot argue that. And these people know, and that's what pisses me off, is that it took me a long time. I was going to go vegan because I thought it was healthy, because that push.
And I was the same. I was the very, very same. I thought vegan was the way to go. I thought, okay, if I just go gluten-free, I'll be fine. I'll be a lot healthier. But I got a lot worse. I tried every single diet, because I was going by the government guidelines. I thought, yeah, if I just go vegan, if I add more plants into my diet, everything will be fine. Absolutely no problems. Then I had a gluten intolerance. Okay, I was told, okay, you just need to go into the shop and buy more gluten-free stuff. This stuff was costing me an absolute fortune, but it wasn't fixing the root of the problem at all. And then when we hear again what Tony was mentioning, I hear every single day that processed red meat is the cause of cancer. Processed red meat is the cause of dementia, mental health, obesity, diabetes, all this stuff. So when you're eating a hot dog or you're eating a bun burger, again, I'll mention this again. They never looked at the study properly. They never looked at what you guys were actually eating this with. When you look at our fast chain supermarket or restaurants like of McDonald's. McDonald's gets a bad rap of the food that it serves. But if you just went into McDonald's and just bought the pates, just the burgers, nothing else, guys, there's no problem. There's absolutely no problem. The problem is what you're having it with: the milkshake, the chips, the bun. You're adding on more stuff. That's what's causing the problems. And that's what these people are just blatantly not seeing at the moment. So when they come out with these research studies, what they should be doing is they should be listening to more people, because there's more and more people out there now that are turning their life around. Okay, they were struggling metabolically, they were struggling with their mental health, and now they're not. I'm one of them. I struggled with my mental health for years. Nobody could tell me what was going on. Okay, and like Tony was mentioning a few minutes ago, yes, we're not doctors, but what we are recommending is this. We're not saying to you guys, okay, you need to take this supplement or you need to take this stuff that's out of a bottle. We're just trying to explain to you guys, before you go down this route, you just need to look at your diet, because you might be actually amazed. You might actually be amazed that you can actually probably reverse these conditions or manage these conditions a lot better than what your doctor's recommended.
And Mark, I'm wondering, what for you was the first point that made you doubt about these kind of studies? I mean, what was the turning point where you started to not necessarily take everything serious that government tells you or the newspapers tell you? I'm curious about that.
I think the biggest thing for me was I had to address my mental health issues very, very quickly, because if I didn't, I've said this many times, I don't think I would have been here like 3 years ago. I genuinely.
But what made you realize that it was not true what they are telling?
Well, for me, because I tried everything. I had to find what was causing it, because every time I had sugar, I was like, okay, there's something wrong with me. And I was always led, okay, if I just go healthy, I need to find another healthy diet, no matter what it is. But what was happening was, no matter what diet I went on, they were all doing the exact same thing. My insulin was being elevated too high. My mental health was getting worse. And I was like, why is this possible? If I'm going from diet to diet and these guys are recommending that this diet is amazing. Like when we look at what's going on now, everybody's been pushed towards being a vegan or working more towards plant-based. I haven't seen one study, not one study, of one person reversing their mental health issues. And I don't think there is any research out there. But when you look at an animal-based diet, there's thousands of people out there that have actually reversed it.
So Mark, if I could just chime in here for a second. So basically you did this through trial and error and process of elimination. And I think, Peter, maybe you can chime on this too, because I think you did the same thing, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was looking a bit in so everybody has this turning point probably, and of course probably all three of us and a lot of our viewers have this aspect that they tried everything and they are suffering from severe health issues, and so they have to take drastic measures. But there's always this moment where you suddenly realize, hey, they have not been telling me the truth. And for me personally, that was the moment that I learned that you don't need carbohydrates. And well, I could go into detail about that. We do that in a lot of our shows, and I do that in a lot of my videos. But that realization, that's such a big thing. The idea that you need carbohydrates, and it suddenly appears to be not true, and it's scientifically easily shown that it's not true. You don't need carbohydrates. Well, yeah, then you start to think twice about all the other things. Do you need vegetables? Well, if you look up the literature, you don't need it. Look up all the nutritional values of the foods. You don't need it. And same about fiber. And yeah, that's how it started for me. And I remember, well, my journey started with this conference series on YouTube. This Low Carb Down Under. It's a very nice conference series. So if people don't know about it, look it up. But also Bart Kay.
Yeah.
Bart Kay especially talked a lot about calories not being important, calorie counting, things like cholesterol. He's also very good at debunking nutrition research and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because that's where I went wrong. I went healthy every year. Like I used to eat like the likes of sweet potato. I used to eat a lot of like vegetables, a lot of rice, brown rice, white rice. I used to make sure my carbohydrates were clean. Like I used to eat a lot of complex carbohydrates. I'd eat a lot of berries. I wouldn't eat too much fruit, but if I did eat fruit, it would be like strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, stuff like that. And then I'd be having my supplements. I'd be having like protein shakes. I'd be having protein bars, keto bars. And I thought I was leading a healthy lifestyle. I thought if I look at my plate, I've got a good amount of carbohydrate there. I've got a good amount of vegetables there. I would have a salad for lunch. When it came to my breakfast, I would have eggs. But what I was doing was I was mixing it with spinach.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's.
I was putting a full bag in the pan.
We could probably do a whole topic on a whole video on spinach, but I just want to tie it back into the dementia thing for a second here, because we were all sort of on the same sort of beginnings. We were lost. We were trying to get healthy. We didn't know what was going on. Whatever we came to this way of eating. But what I noticed, and what I think we all noticed, was there was a point. There was a signal went off in my brain where it was, I hated school my whole life. I couldn't learn. I couldn't focus. I couldn't pay attention. And then, people will label it whatever you want it, but I just knew it was just me. And when I started, my brain started working differently. And it happened very fast. Now, I know some people that are on medications and that are suffering with mental issues. We're not saying this is, we're not saying to stop the medication, that everybody's different. But when you start to heal your brain with real fat, cholesterol, and cutting out the sugar that's degrading your myelin sheath, your nervous system, and that brain starts to just become a proper functioning brain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Later in life, That is not dementia. That is a functioning brain, cognitive decline.
Yeah.
If you can start the process now, feeling good today and thinking with a good brain today will probably dictate how your brain's going to be later. And if you're on the path to brain fog, confusion, this is dementia in progress. And that's kind of what my take on it is, like, feeling good today and seeing the difference today makes a huge, it's something when you feel it, you know it. And then, and as long as you're not regressing, you keep moving forward,
Yeah, Tony, you made a good point about people that are probably on medications at the moment and that are going through mental health issues, and they're probably looking at it. They probably will look at this video and say, "Well, how do I eventually come off them?" And people will think that we're probably saying, "Okay, you need to come off your medications." That's not what we're saying, because if you do that, you're going to have massive withdrawal issues, big time. So we would never recommend anybody to come off your medications. We would never recommend anybody to do anything without the supervision of your doctor. But what we are saying is, if you are going to go down this route, you need to make sure you go down it at the right pace. So if you are taking medications, don't just jump off it. Just make slight changes, because
it's beautiful that you want to. It's beautiful that you want to, but that's
because that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen with people who I work with that deal with it, that have been on antidepressants for a long, long time. I say to them, like, listen, don't come off the antidepressants, but I'm hoping eventually you will come to me and say, well, listen, I don't need these anymore. And this is what happened to me a few weeks ago. I put this up on my story, that a woman came to see me 4 months ago, and she was taking, I think I spoke to Tony about it, taking antidepressants for 12 years. 12 years. Okay. I worked with this woman for 3 months, and I got a message off her 2 weeks ago that she was ready to come off her medication. 2 weeks ago. Now, this woman was on it for 12 years. And I remember having the conversation day one. I said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do this at the right pace. I'm just going to change your diet.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens. But I want you to make sure you go and see your doctor and keep taking your medications until it's time to come off them. And I was absolutely delighted that was her decision and not the doctor.
Yeah. Peter, any thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree, of course, with the advice. And for diabetics, that holds even more. If you are working on your metabolic health, you cannot, before things start to change, already modify your insulin regimen, of course, especially if you're type 1. But yeah, we haven't talked that much about insulin yet, and I'm actually curious about how you think about this. We talked about increasing your fat intake, eating cholesterol. The statins, of course, come into that as well, the whole cholesterol aspect in the brain. But what would be worse? Is it the cholesterol aspect? If you let's assume that you are already eating a little bit of fat, let's say sufficiently fat to nourish your brain. I personally think that the glucose story might be the biggest one, actually, and the insulin. So already improving your metabolic health, reducing insulin resistance in your body will make a big change. And I wonder, Tony, when you described that your mental health improved, was it because of the fat or was it because of reduced insulin? I personally think chance is big that it's the second one. Because you are in ketosis then.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Like, I mean, there's a few things to sort of look at there.
Let's say that's the short-term effect. Let's say that there the insulin comes in most.
Firstly, when you're giving your body the essential nutrients it requires to function, the healing process is a lot more available. Now, the blood sugar and the insulin will control how well the other hormones are working. But yet, what we talk about, and I'm going to tie this into dementia, every time your blood sugar spikes, requires more insulin to get that sugar out of the cells. So speaking from a neurological brain standpoint, that elevated blood sugar the longer that sugar's in your bloodstream and keeps going up, it's breaking down your tissues. It's glycating, nervous system breakdown. So it's like a triple-edged sword. First of all, you're low fat. Then we'll call it on cholesterol medication. So your brain's not getting the stuff it needs to build the stuff it needs. And then the blood sugar's damaging, and the insulin is causing all the other neurotransmitters and hormones to be put on the shelf. So it's all a dance, and it's a huge factor for sure. But you look at it, why do you think they call it? They're starting to call dementia type 3 diabetes. That tells me it's a complete blood sugar, therefore insulin problem.
It is. It's a chronic insulin problem. That's what the issue is. It's very, very simple. I've shown this many, many times on Instagram. When you look at a graph, when you eat carbohydrates, any type of carbohydrate, that's going to have the biggest impact on insulin. That's when your insulin levels are going to be increased. Now, you might get you will get a small insulin spike when it comes to fats and proteins, but nowhere near
physiological
of just eating carbohydrates. Carbohydrates will raise that insulin very, very high. And when you look at the graph, when you get this constant spike, drop, this is what leads to people having major issues, because this is what leads to hunger being increased, cravings being increased, metabolic issues being increased, insulin resistance being increased, inflammation in the body being increased. And let's touch a little bit on the inflammation. Like, I will hear so many people say that about inflammation, about not chronic stress, retaining water. When you eat a lot of carbohydrates, your body's going to retain a lot of water. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Now, the more everybody has a bucket. Okay, everybody has a bucket. Now, if you fill that bucket up to the very, very top with water, what's going to happen? It's going to spill over. Okay, now when that spills over, this is when you get the problems with joint pains. This is when you get the issues with like mental health issues. This is when you get issues with your health. This is when you struggle to lose weight. When your insulin is chronically elevated at a rate too high, you cannot burn fat. It's virtually impossible. It's scientifically impossible. So when people come out with this nonsense about calories, if you're eating a diet that consists of around 40% carbohydrates and you're trying to outwork a bad diet, it's going to come back and haunt you, because what's going to happen is, yes, you will lose the weight, but very, very quickly, when you get down deep into a deficit, you cannot stick to it. Your body's just going to say, listen, I've had enough of this shit. I don't want this anymore. Then chronic stress kicks in.
Yeah.
And then it leads to this cycle. Okay, I'm getting really emotional about this. I don't, and you're fucking miserable doing it.
So, Mark, just touching on it, and Peter, I got a question for you, because just touching on that, it's funny how it all revolves around the same things. And if you just said something there that's interesting, is emotional. You're fighting your body. So you're fighting your own biology and physiology. What is hangry? Hangry is the immediate symptom of this breakdown. Your brain, it's not firing properly.
Sorry, Tony, just one more point. Like, I got into amazing shape all my life when I done the standard 6 meals a day. Yeah. But the amount of stress that put on my body was unbelievable. Like, this was the reason why I entered a bodybuilding competition a few years ago, and I chose to do it doing a carnivore approach. And the reason why I wanted to do it this way was because I know what it's like to walk around with a six-pack. I did it for years. I did the calorie deficits, but the thing was, I could never, ever sustain it. I could never sustain it. After that, I would rush to the restaurant and I would have my favorite dessert. I'd have my favorite meals. And I would be in a position where I just could not stop eating. And I could never understand why I couldn't stop eating. And nobody could tell me why I couldn't stop eating. They all just used to say to me, it's a discipline issue. It's normal. Just get on with it. Yeah. It wasn't until I learned about carnivore and keto, and especially I'd done the bodybuilding competition, I was able to get down to a level of body fat, like 3 to 5%. And I was able to maintain that. I had no urges. I had no cravings. I wasn't getting emotional. I wasn't getting angry about food.
Yeah.
I was very, very relaxed.
And Mark,
Peter, I got a question for you, Peter, because this is something that's very important. Being a type 1 diabetic, Mark has just said basically lowering his carbs, controlling his insulin, eating real food. His brain started working better. Now you, Peter, you need to do this. Do you can you explain to people before you were carnivore or animal-based keto, where you're going through these glucose roller coasters, how your cognitive function changed? Because it's important to hear this.
Definitely. It was very clear that when my blood glucose became stable, that I feel much better. And so by that on itself, I get more mental clarity and more energy. I find it difficult to pinpoint in what way it affected my thinking directly. But anyway, indirectly, being more energetic and that sort of things automatically reflects on your brain as well, of course. One thing that I personally am still feared about is the fact that diabetes is controlled by looking at glucose. Right? At the beginning, it was truly a glucose-centric approach for diabetes. Now people start to look more at insulin as well. But especially in the beginning, but still nowadays, what do? You measure your blood glucose, you think about how much insulin do I need to correct the blood glucose, but your insulin is doing a lot more in your body. And especially when I learned about it. And sorry?
And they don't test for it. They don't test your
I would like a continuous insulin monitor. That would be nice. But also a way to inject the insulin, not under the skin, but a bit more inside, like the pancreas is releasing it directly in the bloodstream. But there's also a barrier between the brain and the rest of your body. And I only learned this a little time ago, is the fact that insulin levels in your brain and your body are not the same.
Yeah.
So that adds up to the problem. If you are insulin resistant, that on itself, if you're type 2 diabetic, and that's correlated 2, 3, or 10 times with dementia. But if you're insulin resistant, type 2 diabetic, you cannot use the glucose that is in the bloodstream. But even worse, in the brain, the insulin levels are kept low. So your brain doesn't become hyperinsulinemic.
Yeah.
So it's a double problem because there's little insulin and still a lot of glucose. But you need a lot of insulin because you're resistant.
Yes.
And so you cannot use anything of it.
Well,
makes perfect sense.
That's where the research of Ben Bickman comes in, where he's explaining how these physiological are pathological and physiological insulin resistance. There's certain times when a woman is pregnant, I think she becomes a little insulin resistant. Every tissue operates differently, and that explains why all these diseases,
PCOS, same story,
metabolic issues, insulin.
But Tony, you say pathological.
Yeah.
I personally, and okay, that's a bold statement, but I think insulin resistance is never pathological in the sense that it's always the right response from your body.
Oh, exactly.
It's always caused by something.
And you know what the argument is, because I hear this an awful lot with PCOS women. The argument is that if you go to the gym and become insulin sensitive, you can actually reverse your insulin resistance. The problem is a lot of people don't have time to go to the gym. And a lot of people are sitting down at an office, or they've got really, really busy lifestyles where there's family, work, whatever it is. So to come out with terms that we just need to go to the gym and burn off this excess glucose is absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. How can you just say to someone, okay, you can become insulin sensitive, just go to the gym and still go home, refill your body with shit, refill carbohydrates. You're just defeating the purpose.
Yeah.
And this is what really annoys me about people that say to people, okay, just go to the gym and become insulin sensitive. You see these people going to the gym and they're going in orange drinks, Lucas, whatever it is, whatever kind of drink it is. They're drinking all these energy drinks. They don't realize that, yes, you're burning all this excess glucose. You might be bringing your insulin levels down. But the minute you start drinking that shit again, your insulin's going back up. So you're just doing this up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down.
I hear you. And it's true. Like when I said that pathological, Peter, I was just trying to put it into context that one is a natural process. The other one could be us creating it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're spiking your blood sugar constantly, is the insulin the problem, or is it the diet, or is it the glucose? And I think it's a combination most of the time of a lot of things. And it's kind of one thing leads into another. But what I will say for dementia purposes is it's all part of it. And if you address the whole picture, your brain will start to work better. And if you correct your metabolic health or be aware of your metabolic health, that's a good foundation to start. Anybody, guys, I gotta get going. I gotta go treat some people with addiction here and do some laser acupuncture. But okay, let's do some final thoughts. And I loved today, man. You guys, this was great.
Well, what I would recommend is we do this again. Because we could talk about this for a long, long time. So we should do it definitely.
So
we could also dive into some other research again. Maybe prepare it a little bit more. But there's a lot of stuff on it, and
I know
big topic.
We're all available for help. If you need some help, we'll put it in the description. If anybody has any questions, if you'd like to see us or want us to talk about something, by all means, leave a message. We're going to be doing this every Thursday where we kind of have a little powwow, three of us, international carnivore style, about stuff. We'll talk about a topic. But the Sundays, the Meat of the Matter podcast, it will be 10 a.m. Pacific. I hope I get this right. 6 p.m. UK Irish time, 7 p.m. Dutch time. And we're doing that where we answer questions and we want you to participate and get engaged. Nothing's off the table. We're just coming at it from our journeys, our stories, our real life, real people, trying to get the word out because we're all inundated all the time with studies that red meat causes dementia, which is bullshit. All right, boys.
100%. We'll speak soon.
Talk soon.